Good afternoon and good morning, depending on exactly where you are all sitting. Welcome to J Street's, unfortunately, emergency briefing about the risk of regional escalation in the wake of the assassination of leading Hezbollah general and Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas. We are just letting folks into the room. I'm going to get started with a couple of technical notes. Just want to let people know, after 3.5 years of doing Zooms, I'm sure you're well familiar that there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens that can be used to ask our panelists questions, and we will try to get through as many of them as possible. I'm going to open up with a series of questions for our two panelists today to get us going. And this conversation is going to be recorded. It's also going to be available then to rewatch and to share on our YouTube channel and on our website through JStream and in a variety of podcast formats. So do feel free to rewatch and to share this if you find it of interest. We are coming together at a very, very delicate moment, very tense moment. We are awaiting Iran's response to last week's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The funeral was over the weekend. That, of course, happened against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Gaza and the killing in the north last week of 12 children and teens in an attack by Hezbollah on Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights. That was followed by the assassination of a top Hezbollah commander, Fuad Shukr, in Beirut. And Iran is vowing revenge, as are its regional proxies. We don't know exactly what that response will be. The head of U.S. Central Command is landing in Tel Aviv right now as we speak to sort of coordinate the response, as we saw in April, the last time that the tensions elevated to this extent. And so we are all anxiously awaiting the next step in this drama. And we are joined today by two really terrific friends of J Street and experts on these issues, Barbara Slavin and Danny Citrinowicz. And Barbara, many of you know both of them from prior J Street webinars. Barbara is a career journalist, a foreign policy expert. She's currently a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center and a lecturer in international affairs at George Washington University. She founded and directed the Future of Iran initiative at the Atlantic Council and has covered foreign policy issues related to terror, the Middle East, and the wider Israeli-Arab conflict as a journalist. Danny Citrinowicz is a national security and intelligence expert currently at the Institute for National Security Studies, National Strategic Studies, and at the Atlantic Council. Danny served 25 years in a variety of positions in Israeli defense intelligence. He was specifically head of the Iran branch, and he represented that division also in the United States. So we are joined by two incredible experts. And I want to open up by asking you to we're going to walk through Iran, the proxies, Israel, the US, and the region. We'll walk through each of those five actors, and I'd love for you to help us understand the current thinking calculus that each of them is making at this delicate moment. And so we start, Barbara, with Iran, and specifically with this new government barely in office for a matter of days, having to deal with this crisis. So tell us a little what is going on in Tehran right now, what the calculus is.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be on with Danny, who I recruited to the Atlantic Council some years ago. Maybe I'll convince him to come over to Stimson. I have to say something about Israel first before I talk about Iran and its response. I mean, for Bibi, this really was a twofer, because not only did he kill Ismail Haniyeh, and thereby get someone who'd long been on Israel's target list, make sure that peace talks on Gaza would go nowhere. But he also torpedoed the new Iranian president on his inauguration day. Masoud Pezeshkian, nobody has huge hopes for this guy, but he was considered to be better than the alternative. He won snap presidential elections after the previous Iranian president died in a helicopter crash. And he gave, he's been giving speeches and interviews talking about re-engagement with the West and how Iran wants to have a better relationship with Europe, United States, and not just rely on Russia and China. So by killing Hania, right after the inauguration, it's a huge humiliation. And there are different accounts on how he was killed, whether it was a bomb that was planted in advance or it was some kind of drone or missile that killed him. Nonetheless, I mean, he was a guest of the Iranian government. He was in a place that is reserved for VIPs, was supposed to be super safe, and he was killed. So Iran will retaliate. That is clear. The supreme leader of the country made that clear. Every Iranian official has made that clear. And in the last few days, we've been in a situation where various intermediaries have been calling or rushing to Tehran saying, please don't, please don't, please don't, but they will. One wrinkle on timing, I see that the Organization of Islamic Conference is having a meeting on Wednesday. So, will they wait or will they go tomorrow? Not clear. The Iranians have also have said this several times, that they want international condemnation of actions like this, and that they go forward with retaliation when there is no such condemnation by the UN Security Council or other bodies. US has vetoed efforts to condemn the Israeli assassination at the UN Security Council. So I think Iran will go forward. I would expect they will go forward in coordination with Hezbollah and the Houthis, possibly the militias in Iraq as well. And the multi-pronged approach will distinguish this retaliation from what they did in April. I'd be curious if Danny shares that assessment. Obviously, United States, CENTCOM, others are all well prepared now, and I fervently share the wish that we do not see casualties in Israel that would require Israel to respond even further than it already has. Maybe I'll stop there and let Danny jump in.
Danny,
yeah,
just,
sorry, yeah.
Let me ask you also, just to add into this, there is at least a perception that the new president, his agenda had been, and the hope for him was that he was more interested in a level of engagement with the West. And the question I would just add into the mix is, do you think that is at all a calculus here in the level and nature of the retaliation that is likely to come? Will his desire to keep some opening temper what is likely to come?
That is very interesting question. But first, let me start by saying that again, thank you for inviting me. I think it's extremely important event, given the fact that we are never being close as we are today to a regional war. We have to say that. We don't know how things will develop, but we are very on the verge of a very serious escalation. I'll start by saying that I think, like Barbara said, in order to understand what the Iranians think, I think we should return back to the 14th of April. After the 14th of April, the Iranians really thought that they draw a line in the sand, and they managed to rebuild what we call the deterrence equation with Israel. They highlighted to Israel what they can't accept, and I think in that regard, they thought that they are balanced. They did a balancing act, self-defense, and now for them, they were, I think, quite affirmative in thinking that nothing like that will occur in the near future. What happened in regarding Ismail Haniyeh is the fact that they see that as a total breach of every red line. Like Barbara said, it's humiliation for the supreme leader itself. Haniyeh was their guest in inauguration of Pezeshkian, but also, again, it's a breach of Iranian sovereignty in that regard. So in order to retaliate, they have to return back. The benchmark is the 14th of April. So I don't know if they're going to do the same thing, but I think they relate to that in their retaliation. So I think we need to expect that there will be a harsh retaliation. And I think the Supreme Leader said that out in the open. The RGC leader said that. And so I think in that regard, we are waiting for retaliation that will probably come. It will be very hard to persuade the Iranians not to retaliate. And the retaliation, unlike the 14th of April, probably will be combined. If in the 14th of April we had Iranian retaliation, really a small number of rockets being or missiles being launched from Yemen or Iraq, or even Hezbollah, now it will be connected also the Hezbollah retaliation for the death of Fuad Shukr. So we are facing a very, very dangerous development in that regard. It will be very hard, and like Barbara said, I truly hope that they manage to foil the attack, the US and Israel, because then it will allow Israel to react probably in a way that will be decreasing the tension, not increasing it. I truly hope so, and then we can avoid escalation, but it will be very hard to do so given the current characteristics. One last thing about the new government in Iran. For sure, Pezeshkian wants to invest in one important thing. For him, they think about returning back to some sort of negotiation, even agreement regarding the nuclear issue, but it will allow it to lift sanctions over, especially the energy sector in Iran. Now, these developments are not supportive of this policy. Pezeshkian, we have to remember, is new in position, probably lack the expertise needed, is the head now of the SCNS, but at the end of the day, is probably very weak comparing to the RGC and the army commanders. But I have to say one important thing about that. We saw in the recent days a lot of articles coming in the reformist newspaper like Jumhuri Islami, talking about the fact that Iran need to think twice before acting or reacting against Israel, and not be fooled by Netanyahu that is maybe expecting them to retaliate. Now, I'm not saying it will have a vast influence on the retaliation of Iran in the upcoming days, but I think that if we find ourselves in escalation, the fact that Pezeshkian is there, head of the SCNS, might have a cooling effect on the Iranian activity. Again, it's very hard to foresee right now, but I think the fact we have Pezeshkian not Raisi might help in that regard in preventing an escalation. Again, it won't prevent the retaliation, I think, because Supimide already obliged to obligated himself to that. But I think that if push comes to shove, we find ourselves in a worsened situation. Pezeshkian, as a president, I think there is an opportunity, maybe, to see how it can be a cooling effect in that regard.
So I'm going to now broaden our focus out a little bit from Tehran and from the Iranian regime itself to the proxies in the neighborhood. And I'm going to assume that there are some on our Zoom today who don't know the specifics of the different organizations. So I would ask, as we sort of review the players, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, and Hamas, if you could sort of walk us through very, specifically each one of them and what the calculus would be for them to potentially join in, and to what degree are they really acting independently, or are they acting really only at the behest of Iran as agents of Iran? To what degree do they have independent agency here to make decisions of their own? Because for Hezbollah, of course, the number 2 was assassinated only 2 weeks ago. So Danny, if we could start with you and you could walk us through the proxies, and then I'll come back over to Barbara.
Sure. First and foremost, of course, Hezbollah is not a proxy, it's a partner of Iran. And Iran uses it to coordinate between it and the other proxies because of the close proximity in terms of language, culture. And since the assassination of Soleimani, I think that Hezbollah gained a lot of strength in its influence over the other proxies. Hezbollah, as we all know, the biggest movement, the Shiite movement in Lebanon, that actually is becoming from a terror organization to an army because of Iranian help. It has strategic capabilities from accurate missiles through drones, through anti-aircraft system, highly advanced one. And of course, its capabilities are enormous. And during the war, the civilian war in Syria, it actually was able to really develop its offensive capabilities. And from there on, it's also threatening about conquering the Galilee in that regard. Now, we had, from 2006, we had some sort of arrangements, in a way, rules of the game with Hezbollah, that if you're not attacking it in Lebanon, he won't attack Israel. And of course, since the 8th of October, Hezbollah decided to open a fire against Israel to spread the Israeli army and to prevent him from reaching his target, his goal in the war, meaning dismantling Hamas capabilities, his ruling capabilities, but also his military one. And from the 8th of October, he found himself in a limit war in a northern border that forced Israel to evacuate more than 60,000 people living up north. And this war has ups and downs. And of course, the last event, the very unfortunate event that Hezbollah actually shot a missile that hit Majal Shams, hit a football court in Majal Shams, a Druze city in northern part of Israel, killing 12 kids. And Israel had to retaliate by killing the number 2 actually of Hezbollah, a guy named Ford Shukr, that made known from his nickname Haj Muhsen. And now Hezbollah is of course threatening to retaliate. We don't know how he's going to retaliate, but given the fact that he has advanced capabilities, his retaliation might be more severe than the Iranian one to the death of Ismail Haniyeh. And this kind of combination can really threaten Israel and really pose a lot of stress on our active defense capabilities. That is why this kind of combination is really, really threatening Israel. And because of the geographic element, the fact that Hezbollah is much more close to Israel than Iran, of course, it can use variety of capabilities from its UAVs, its missile, short range, medium range, and long range one that is covering all over Israel to hit strategic facilities in Israel, air bases, and other capabilities. So in that regard, this organization is very, very dangerous. And the fact that we are facing its retaliation, this is something that can really deteriorate the situation to war. I don't think, like in the Iranian case, and I have to say that, I don't think Hezbollah is interested in a wide war with Israel. I think they have a lot to lose in that regard. But the thing is that both, also Iran and Hezbollah, are willing to take the risk of escalating in order to what we call rebalancing the deterrence equation between them and Israel. For Hezbollah, killing is one senior operative that's very close to Nasrallah in Beirut, in the Dachen Beirut, actually the center of gravity of the organization. This is something that is crossing a red line that he has to retaliate in that regard. But this is one problem that we are facing. The other problem is that, like you mentioned, there are other proxies that finding Israel more attractive in terms of attacking it. The Shiite militias in Iraq, of course, we all know their activity against the U.S. presence in Iraq. And again, I have to say that not all of the what we call the PMF is working against Israel, but we see more and more militias that coming out supported by Iran and attacking Israel and the U.S. presence in the region. There were all of them from the Nujaba to Cyber al-Haq and Qatar Hezbollah. All of them have strategic capabilities, missiles and drones, and attacking. And after the unfortunate event where they killed 3 U.S. soldiers in Jordan, then they decided to enhance their offensive activity against Israel. So since then, we are facing almost every night attacks coming from Iraq against strategic places in Israel, but Israel has managed to foil most of them. Some of them, like in Eilat a couple of months ago, that actually managed to hit one of the Navy bases in Eilat using one of the drones. So they are very sophisticated and advanced, and they have close cooperation now with the Houthis. Now, finalize by saying just a couple of things about the Houthis, and then, of course, I'll let Barbara have to speak about them as well, and, of course, all of the other proxies. But I'll say regarding the Houthis that the Houthis are Shiites, but not exactly the Shiites as the Iranians, not get what they call the Zaydis. I'm not going to go in depth to that, but it's important to say that they were almost a family, a clan in the northern part of Yemen that managed to take over control over 70% of Yemen. They had a long war with the Saudis, and they were supported by Iran. Iran used them as a proxy in order to attack the Saudis and actually transform this organization from being a terror one, small organization, to becoming a strategic threat, not only to Israel itself. And since the 8th of October, they decided to support Hamas. They're part of the Axis, and they're attacking Israel, especially on our southern part, like the city of Eilat, but also the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, the BAM, preventing ships from crossing the straits towards Israel, and managed to severely cause a severe damage, economical one, to Israel, but also to Egypt, because a lot of ships are not crossing the Suez Canal. So they're becoming a regional problem. They obligated themselves to continue the war against Israel until Israel will stop the war in Gaza. And Israel had to, after one of the UAVs managed to hit Tel Aviv 2 weeks ago, Israel attacked Hodeidah port being used by the Houthis, and the Houthis, of course, warned to retaliate. So we're also waiting for their retaliation. So we have a combination of retaliation process happening right now. We have the Houthis want to revenge the attack on Hodeidah. We have Hezbollah threatening to revenge the killing of Fuad Shukr, and we have Iran threatening to revenge the death of Ismail Haniyeh. So all of that creating a very problematic situation in a way that this kind of merge is a threat to Israel, and then it's posing a lot of stress on the coalition, international coalition headed by the US. And I truly hope that they manage to foil this kind of coordinated attack, assuming that it will be coordinated, because otherwise we'll find ourselves in a very problematic situation. So that's all in all, I think, really in a nutshell about those proxies. We can speak hours on each and every one of them.
Barbara, that was a very comprehensive review by Danny, not surprising, as we both know Danny very well, and that was really terrific. One aspect that was not touched on is Hamas's role in this and the calculus there. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything to Danny's.
It was, yeah, I agree with pretty much everything he said. I mean, I think, Hezbollah, of course, is constrained by the fact that Lebanon is a failing state, and it doesn't want a repeat even of 2006, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what Hezbollah chooses to do. Let's talk about Hamas. Israel has assassinated 15 leaders of Hamas over the last more than 2 decades. And, it has not, Hamas became stronger, not weaker. We can talk about some of the other reasons why, like Bibi Netanyahu deciding it was a good idea to encourage Qatar to support Hamas in Gaza so that there could not be a Palestinian state, so that the PA and Hamas could not get back together. Just a couple of weeks ago, there were so-called unity talks in Beijing among Palestinian factions, and there was actually an agreement to create some sort of unified structure, to go forward with whatever would follow the Gaza war. And of course, by killing Haniyeh, who was also chief negotiator on the ceasefire talks in Hamas, Israel has effectively put that aside for some time. Hamas is still there. Just if you look at your newspaper today, buried deep inside is the kind of story that would have been on the front page not long ago. Israel has once again bombed a school in Gaza and killed 30 people, mostly women and children, in pursuit of what? We don't know. Some Hamas operatives, perhaps. Although the Israelis now say that they did get Mohammed Deif, the military commander who was in many ways behind the atrocities of October 7th, Yahya Sinwar is still unaccounted for. He is still somewhere, presumably deep underground in Gaza, and the war grinds on. 40,000 dead. 40,000 dead. So when, how, I mean, we don't know when this conflict is going to end. Certainly the escalation that we are going to see now as a result of the retaliation from Iran and Hezbollah and the Houthis and so on, will have an impact. But the war in Gaza will continue as long as there is a single Hamas operative alive, and there is no way that Israel is going to be able to kill them all. One interesting question, of course, and I don't know if Danny has some thoughts on this, is who will succeed Ismail Haniyeh as the sort of public face or diplomatic, in quotes, face of the organization. It would be the height of irony if it would be the guy that Israel tried to assassinate in Jordan back in the 1990s, Khalid Mashal. Folks may remember that I think this was the last time, was it the last time Bibi was prime minister, or I think Bibi was prime minister, and a Mossad operative managed to put poison in the ear of Mashal in Amman, brushed past him. And the Jordanian government basically said, if you don't provide an an antidote to this poison and save Mishal's life, we will break off our still rather fresh peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. So, it would be the height of irony if it's Mishal who then becomes the public face of Hamas. So that has to be sorted out as well. And then, will there be any kind of process toward ceasefire, in the foreseeable future? Certainly, Israel doesn't seem interested, and Hamas certainly would not be interested at this point in time in talking to the Israelis about a ceasefire.
Let's get into what I think in the Q&A. I don't know if you've been following it as we've been chatting, but basically every single question is about Bibi's motivations and Netanyahu's motivations and why can't we restrain him. So, it's a pretty consistent line of inquiry. And I would say that the bulk of the questions, and I would say the tenor of, part of the American public, not the whole of it, but there's a part of the American public that just blames Bibi Netanyahu for everything related to this, that this all really comes down to him. Could you talk a bit about each of your perceptions about the personal role of Netanyahu, and then more broadly an Israeli national interest? There's an argument to be made that let's say the missile attack on the soccer field in Majid Shams by Hezbollah did require a response. Just put aside Netanyahu, put aside his personal politics, and one can argue as well that after October 7th, the Hamas leadership is a legitimate target for the country that has been attacked. But where do you draw the lines between what is an Israeli national interest and sort of the personal? And why is it that he becomes such the personal target in so many of the questions and discussions? Barbara, let me start with you, and Danny, I'll come up to you second.
Yeah, I'll start with his speech to a joint session of Congress.
A good place to start.
Where he talked about total victory, which is unachievable, as everyone, with half a brain knows, and where he tried to conflate the national interests of the United States and those of Israel. One analogy I've been using is the Peanuts, the old Peanuts cartoon, Lucy and the Football, where, she puts down the football for Charlie Brown to kick and then pulls it away just at the last second. And the football is a ceasefire. Lucy is Bibi, and Biden, Charlie Brown. I mean, whether it's Bibi and his government and his right-wing government have been playing the United States and Biden for fools for months, exploiting Biden's good nature, his genuine concern for Israel. Bibi's not interested, and his cabinet is not interested in a ceasefire, because a ceasefire, changes the domestic dynamics in Israel such that there will be a reckoning for the security failure of the terrible security failures of October 7th and what led up to that. And, at some point, new elections, and bye-bye Bibi. And bye-bye Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all the rest of these hideous people who have brought Israel into this situation, over the last, not just 10 months, but since they came back, they came into office last year. I guess it was last year again, or was it the year before now?
It's been a very long 18 months.
So Israeli domestic politics is more than Bibi, but Bibi is the public face, the chutzpah-riddled, egregious public face, the Academy Award winner for Hasbara, who has been trying to snow. I don't know who he's snowing anymore. Maybe a lot of Republicans, Christian fundamentalists in this country, certainly not most American Jews, certainly not the Biden administration anymore. But, how do you pull him back? It's very difficult. If the US is now in a situation where once again we are putting our own people at risk to save Bibi's butt and to save Israel. So we're not exactly going to announce that we're curtailing arms sales or arms deliveries to Israel at this point in time. It's a nightmare. It's quicksand. We are so deeply stuck in it, and I just don't know how we get out of it.
Danny, help us get out of it.
I wish I could find a way. First and foremost, I have to say something that maybe to state the obvious, but someone that's sitting in the state of Israel, I want to thank President Biden and the US administration for the tremendous support since the 8th of October. People in Israel do not understand the fact that we are supportive or being supported by the US has so many layers in terms not only about the support that we are getting in terms of the political or diplomatic support, even not, the ships go back and forth with the weapons. It's also for the fact that our enemy sees the fact that we are supported by the strongest superpower in the world. And this has a tremendous effect on the ability of Israel to rebuild its deterrence. So in that regard, I think that we meaning the population of Israel, the people who live in Israel, we owe the greatest gratitude to this administration, especially for President Biden, for being there in our darkest times. 8th of October, 7th and 8th of October, I remember where I was, in my house, thinking about that we are close to scenes that we never saw that you would see. But thankfully so, with the help of the famous don't, no Hezbollah, no Iran, no other proxy really entered the war and actually enabled us to focus on Hamas. So in that regard, we have to state the obvious, and people tend to forget it, and people tend to think that it's nice to have the US support or whatever, but without that, we were in a very, very dark place, especially regarding where our army was on the 7th of October in that regard. And it took us some time to recover in that regard, and we needed that support. So I think it's important to say, because people tend to forget that. Regarding what Barbara said, I have to say something that I think need to be highlighted. Even if we won't find ourselves in escalation, even if we're able to foil the next Iranian or Hezbollah attack, we tend back to the same starting point. And the starting point is very problematic. Hezbollah will continue attacking our forces, and the Shiite militias and the Houthis will continue to do the same. And why? Because the key lies, in the end of the day, with the ability to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. Ceasefire in Gaza is actually the first and foremost, this is the key to finding also a ceasefire in our northern border and stop Houthis and Shiite militias attacking Israel. This is the key. Without reaching that, and again, same thing that said Hassan Nasrallah last week in his speech, without reaching that ceasefire, they will continue attacking us. And even if the escalation will be prevented now, in the future, we'll find ourselves in another escalation, another missile that will hit something else and we'll have to retaliate. So in order to stop this kind of circle, we have to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. This is the key. Now, in order to do so, the Israeli government needs to actually stand by what Bibi offered, and President Biden declared that the proposal for a ceasefire. And this will be imperative in order to calm the situation. And I'm not even, there's discussion about normalization with Saudi Arabia, yes or no, but even without it, I think that it's crucial to reach a ceasefire. Now, the problem is that, as we see, again, for me, it's easier to analyze the Iranians than the Israeli government or the Israeli prime minister. But it's obvious that there is a mixture between his personal ambitions, interest, and the national one. And it is not me saying that it's the leaks coming from every cabinet meeting discussing the releasing of the hostages. I think first and foremost, it's the moral obligation of Israel to release those hostages, regardless of the cost. Because at the end of the day, those people went to sleep on the 6th of October in their houses in the state of Israel were kidnapped, raped, butchered, slaughtered. So their families being going through dramatic events, and they were kidnapped. And now we have to release them. So regardless of everything, it's a moral obligation. Unfortunately, there are elements in Israel that think that it's more important to kill the last Hamas operative than release those hostages. And while doing so, we will force to fight the war in the up north and regarding the Shiite militias and so forth. So the key is ceasefire. Without reaching a ceasefire, there won't be an end to the current situation. And there won't be a ceasefire until Bibi, that is actually very dominant, of course, in the cabinet, will understand that it's also for its own benefit. Until he won't understand that, I'm not sure we will reach that conclusion, unfortunately. So we are actually in some sort of a catch-22. And unfortunately, I don't see an opening right now, hopefully. But again, I'm very doubtful that something will change in the near future in that regard. One other last thing for that, I think that we have to remember also the developments in the West Bank, and not only in Gaza. Even if we'll find a ceasefire in Gaza and things will be calmer, and maybe we'll find a certain agreement, and Amos Hochstein will manage to make some tricks or magic regarding Hezbollah and find a way to push the Hezbollah operative back, I don't know how many kilometers towards the Litani River. We still have the West Bank problem in Israel. You know, every night the IDF has to have other operation, whether it's in Tulkarem, Jenin, and other places, because the Palestinian Authority is too weak to handle it. And we have to remember that Palestinian Authority, they are the partner of the State of Israel in terms of supporting Israel in the fighting against terror, fighting against Iran. Now, we have to make a decision in that regard. We cannot also continue, regardless of what will happen with Hamas in Gaza, we have to take dramatic decisions regarding the West Bank. There are other elements in the Israeli government that calling out to the open for the destruction, the dismantle of the Palestinian Authority. I personally think that it will be a disaster for the State of Israel to return back to controlling those Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus. I don't want that to happen. But at the end of the day, this is another aspect that we have to relate to. Without finding a solution, without, I think, strengthening Palestinian Authority, even that it's some sort of a political horizon, at the end of the day, they will collapse regardless of what we're going to do, and then we find ourselves controlling those cities. So I think that there is a strategic way to find a way out of it, reaching a ceasefire, working with the moderate states, the Sunni states, especially the UAE and maybe Saudi Arabia, to work together in terms of building the Palestinian Authority, maybe returning back to Gaza, and then allowing some sort of a path to normalization with Saudi Arabia. That, by the way, if you ask me regarding Iran, the best thing that Israel can do in order to increase the threat posture regarding Iran is a normalization with Saudi Arabia. So in that regard, I think that will be the magic solution to our situation, but it won't happen until Netanyahu will agree on ceasefire, and especially on strengthening the Palestinian Authority. And with that happen, those things will happen. I think that regardless of what happens in Gaza, Israel will still be in a very difficult situation.
Barbara, Danny's raised Saudi Arabia, and I wanted to circle around to the neighborhood. And as we sit here tonight and today waiting for what is going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours, in April, of course, the engagement of Jordan and Saudi Arabia and others in the region was a very important part of what made sure that things didn't get through and that we didn't see an escalation. What is your read of the likelihood of, again, a sort of regional cooperation around defense tonight and tomorrow night against a possible Iranian attack? And is Saudi Arabia or Jordan or others willing to step up the way that they did? When does that line of credit run out? What's your take on the regional dynamics?
That's a really interesting question. I just gut feeling, I'm not sure they'll step up this time in the way that they did in April. How many chances for a ceasefire do you give Israel? We had a UN Security Council resolution and still no ceasefire. Biden gave a speech and still no ceasefire. So, U.S. patience, even though we will step up and defend Israel, and thank you, Danny, for your words. I mean, I think it means a lot that the U.S. was able to help Israel after October 7th. But, the situation now, the U.S. will do what is necessary. CENTCOM is there and so on. But I'm not sure Jordan will shoot down missiles and drones this time. I'm not sure how much help the Saudis will give. Their publics are inflamed by the death toll and the atrocities being committed in Gaza. Jordan is not in the most stable of situations right now. And one of the risks of this prolonged war is that Israel could also destabilize Jordan, which would be a tremendous blow to Israeli security, and something that does not appear to have entered the calculus of Netanyahu and his government, which is really, really concerning. I did mention, I saw just before coming on that the Organization of Islamic Conference is having an emergency meeting in Jeddah on Wednesday. So that would be a meeting that would certainly condemn Israel for killing Hania. Again, we don't know if the retaliation will come before, during, after this meeting, or whether that's a consideration. One other thing we haven't mentioned among the visitors to Tehran is Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister of Russia, as we speak, is in Tehran talking to the Iranians. So I would love to be a fly on the wall and find out what he is advising Iran to do in terms of retaliation, and what the Russian role in all of this might be as well. Would be interesting to know. So yeah, to go back to your question, I don't think we will see the same level of support from Arab countries. I think they have had it, and that this gratuitous killing of Hania. Okay, I understand the assassination in Beirut after what happened to the kids in the Golan. That one can see as a tit for tat, even if it was a bigger tat than the original, perhaps. But the Hania killing, Hania was the chief interlocutor on the ceasefire talks. And as the Emir of Qatar tweeted, how do you achieve a ceasefire when you kill the chief negotiator for the other side? So it was so provocative and so counterproductive. If your object is to get a ceasefire in Gaza and cool down, de-escalate all the various tensions in the region. And I'm sure Israel has had many opportunities to kill Hania before and would have afterwards. Why did they have to do it in Tehran on that day?
Right. Well, I think you answered that at the beginning about why.
A twofer, right? Humiliate the Iranians, short circuit Pezeshkian's chances and prevent a ceasefire.
So, Danny, you have spent your entire career in the Israeli security world, either in the IDF or outside analyzing. And there's a lot of questions in the chat about the United States and the use of leverage to enforce the American interest, the global interest, the regional interest in pushing Netanyahu and this government to accept a ceasefire, which the perspective, at least running through again the Q&A in this particular Zoom, the perspective is mostly that this is all about Netanyahu, and that the only obstacle really to getting to a ceasefire is him, and that the U.S. has leverage that it just doesn't use under this administration. I'm curious your perception. Maybe Barbara, I'll come back to you as well. Do you think that Netanyahu personally is the only obstacle to a ceasefire at this point, and B, that there is a lever that isn't being used that should be used in order to press, I guess, as the president said apparently in a call last week, to stop the bullshit That was apparently what was said on the phone call. I'm curious your take on that.
Interesting question. First, I just want to relate to what Bara said on Jordan. I think that the last events, especially the 14th of April, but even more than that, I think highlight the understanding that Jordan is sovereignty and protection of Jordan is also extremely important for the Israeli national interest. Now, there are people in Israel that keep forgetting that and thinking that Jordan, we can take them for granted, but we shouldn't. We mustn't. We have to strengthen the kingdom. We have to strengthen Abdallah. We have to strengthen the connection with the Jordanian army and security services, because actually, I think that in many ways, the Israeli eastern border starts with the border between Jordan and Iraq, not between the border between Jordan and Israel. We have to see that way, and we have to support them in so many ways. I think I see that with a grave concern, the fact that there are a lot, or even more than some, there are a lot of problems between the king and Bibi, between Netanyahu. I think it's counter productive to the interest of the state of Israel. And I think we have to understand that Jordan is crucial to our national interest. We have to work accordingly, working with the Jordanians, speaking with them, discussing with them ways to ease the tension in the West Bank and of course in Jerusalem, and give them more place in the discussions, because otherwise we don't want the Jordan will be affected by the Iranian access. And then what happened yesterday when Ahmad Safadi had to come to Tehran to speak with Barikani on maybe asking, even begging them not to retaliate in a way that will push Jordan into this kind of escalation. So in that regard, I think that's something that we have to say upfront, the importance of Jordan to the interest of the state of Israel. Now, regarding Netanyahu and President Biden, look, I think that I don't want to say the irony or the tragedy or vice versa, but I think that, like many people say in Israel, President Biden is probably will be the last Zionist president. And I'm not saying that the future president of the United States won't support Israel, but it's something about President Biden himself, the fact that he knew all prime minister from Golda Meir onwards, that transformed him to be very obligated to the state of Israel, regardless of Bibi Netanyahu. Now, I think that in the end of the day, that's I'm sure that the U.S. has a lot of possibilities to pressure Israel and to pressure specifically Netanyahu. But I think that for Biden, President Biden, the most important thing is protect the state of Israel and preventing, of course, any escalation to a regional war that will be counterproductive for the U.S. interest. So I think in that regard, I truly hope that Netanyahu does not exploit that in that regard. I truly hope so, because we cannot create a crisis between Israel and the U.S. given or in light of the current situation in Israel. Even if we'll save ourselves for an escalation or regional war, at the end of the day, those connections are extremely important. That is why I hope that something dramatic will change in the way of thinking of the Israeli cabinet or Netanyahu itself regarding reaching a ceasefire with Hamas. I am very skeptical that the U.S. administration will change its action against Netanyahu. Actually, as a Israeli citizen, I hope they won't change it and will continue the support. But I truly hope that Netanyahu won't exploit it in that regard. There are a lot of reports in the Israeli media saying that Netanyahu sees President Biden as a lame duck. That's why, and he's sure that he will get the U.S. support. I don't know if that's true or not, but I really think that, given the fact that we have such a president that's really fully supportive of Israel, I don't think he will take the necessary or serious action in order to pressure Netanyahu. And I hope that Netanyahu will be convinced that he has to change his policy. Again, I don't know how it will happen, but I doubt that it will come from the U.S. administration, at the current U.S. administration in that regard.
So, Barbara, I see you shaking your head, and we've watched Bibi Netanyahu in public life for 3 decades. And Danny, I love the fact that you hope that maybe there will be change. I've given up that hope. I think that we know exactly who Bibi Netanyahu is and what he thinks, and he was very, as one of the people in the Q&A said, he came to Congress last week and he said this is a battle between barbarianism and civilization, and there's only one way out, and that's for us to win, and we're fighting the war for you. So Barbara, I don't know if I can buy into the hope that Danny has. I'd love to. I really wish that there would be, somebody will wake up one day and the cabinet will change its mind. But given that that isn't the case, just from an analytical point of view, put aside an ideological point of view, analytically, what can the US do to actually make it clear that it's time for Israel to agree to this deal?
Well, I'm having flashbacks to being a young reporter covering the Israeli elections in 1999 and being in a room with Bibi and a bunch of Israeli journalists where he pointed his finger at us and he said, "If I win, be very afraid," he said, showing his love for the journalistic profession and fact-checking even then. What can we do? I mean, it's an election year in the United States. And the tone may be set more by Kamala Harris in a way than it will be by Biden. So far, she's been very calibrated. She gave very nuanced remarks after meeting Bibi, where she actually showed some empathy for the Palestinians. Horror, shriek on the part of some, that she actually showed she cared about human life. But it's hard to foresee really major steps from the US. I mean, all these weapons are in the pipeline. Israel presumably has what it needs, and Central Command is there. Kurilla is there in Tel Aviv, in the bunker with the Israelis, planning to defend against whatever the Iranians, Hezbollah, et cetera, Houthis will do. So we're kind of stuck. And Jeremy, you know better than me about Israeli politics. The Knesset is out. And so nobody is going to be bringing down the current government until what, October at the very earliest would be a vote of no confidence. And what additional mayhem can happen between now and October? I shudder to think. So I'm afraid we're just going to be, in this sort of white knuckle situation for the foreseeable future. And unless, Netanyahu somehow has a change of heart and sees that it might be in Israel's advantage, maybe, Israel gets lucky and gets Sinwar, and then finally Bibi can declare victory. That's perhaps the only way in which I think this nightmare comes to an end in the next few months. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I just don't see it.
So we have maybe 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure I give you time, each of you, to summarize what you think we need to be watching out for really in the next 24, 48 hours. What are the immediate signs that we are going to have to read the tea leaves and see if we are looking at escalation, looking at de-escalation? What does Iran's actions look like if they're not trying to blow this up? What does it look like if they are? Similarly on the Israeli side, but try to wrap that all together into closing remarks. And I'll start with you, Danny, and come to Barbara last.
Well, first, I think, again, it's another opportunity to say thank you for inviting me. I think, again, we are in a very interesting situation right now when we are on the verge of to say, a regional war. After the 8th of October, of course, there were clashes between Israel and the Axis, but we've never been in this situation in the past, instead of being so close to a war that will embedded all the Axis against Israel, and hopefully, again, with the U.S. support, we're able to foil these attacks. But generally speaking, we are entering a very sensitive time that we can find ourselves easily in a regional war that I hope that's not for us, and not even not for the region itself, that those things will develop into war, because it will have a devastating effect on every one of us. But the problem is that, and again, returning back to what I said at the beginning, the key for the current situation lies in Gaza. nowhere else. Only reaching a ceasefire at the end of the day with Hamas will allow us to stop the war, will allow us to reach an agreement with Hezbollah that I think it's doable but again, as long as we'll reach a ceasefire in Gaza. And I think that in the end of the day will give us the capability to increase, even not normalization, but to increase our cooperation with the Gulf states and especially the Saudi Arabia. So in that regard, we have to return back to that. Hopefully, a lot of things will depend on the Israeli retaliation to the upcoming attack. Again, assuming, like Baba said from the beginning, that Iran will retaliate. It was for them a breach of all red lines. They will have to retaliate. Hopefully, we're able to follow that in a way that Israel's response will be limited and enable us to return back to some sort, I'll say normality, because it's not normal, the situation that we are in to begin with, but some sort of a steady state that will prevent us from reaching escalation. But the next 24, 48, maybe 32 hours, who knows, will be crucial, and only after the attack and we'll able to understand where we are going. And again, hoping with the US help, defensive-wise, but also the deterrence-wise, will allow us to contain the current escalation. But I'll finish with that. The situation is very, very sensitive, and escalation is almost imminent.
Barbara, over to you.
Yeah, I hope that the Iranians will confine themselves to military targets as they essentially did in April. That will be easier to defeat. That Hezbollah will also be extremely calibrated in what it does, that it will not go after population centers. I hope Israelis will all go quickly to their various bomb shelters. And that there will be no, additional loss of civilian life. And I agree. I just have to agree with Danny that the key is Gaza. And when will Israel say enough? That they've done so much damage. Do they have to get Sinwar? Or can they simply say, we've killed so many Hamas operatives, we've destroyed so many tunnels, all the rest. We can now say now is the time for a ceasefire. And then will Hamas accept a ceasefire after Haniya's death? Or will they keep Israel waiting at this point? So a lot of variables, and we probably won't know until later this week where we are.
All right, we will unfortunately be watching this with very nervous eyes and with a lot of thoughts for you, Danny, and all of our friends and family in Israel, and of course all those in the region who are going to be affected by this. J Street will continue to work as we do to try to press the White House, press the Congress in order to press Netanyahu, and where necessary, also press Hamas through intermediaries to get to that ceasefire, because that is the only way to begin to unravel all of this, as you said, Danny. So thank you to both of you for taking an hour out of your days to help the J Street community to better understand what's going on, and look forward to talking to you at future events, hopefully not under the darkness of the clouds that are over our heads right now. So thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.